Like to call the meeting to order, please. Can we start with a roll call?
Dr. Arger. Here. Ms. Carano. Present. Mr. Kerrigan.
Here.
Mr. Dortch.
Here.
Mr. Farahi.
Here.
Mr. Finland.
Here.
Mr. Flynn.
Here.
Mr. Hawkins.
Here.
Mr. Humke.
Here.
Mr. McGovern.
Here.
Mr. Sullivan.
Here.
Ms. Weber. Here. Ms. Zadra. Here.
Thank you. Okay, can you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Got a motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Any public comment this morning? Sure. Okay, thank you. Before we jump into the review and approval of the minutes of the June 26th meeting, any questions, comments? If not, do I have a motion to accept them?
So moved.
Got a motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right, before we jump into the President's report, just wanted to welcome Dr. Arger to the board officially. Okay. And Mr. Baum?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, we've just finished up fiscal year 13-14 and had some positive trends that I'll quickly recap for you. We saw 163,257 definite room nights produced, and you have before you a breakdown of every booking for the last fiscal year by room nights, whether it's new business or not, the market segment, the region of the country it came out of, and including the specific city and state. And you can see that there's a total of 138 different groups that comprise that net booking volume of 163,257. That's obviously still short of our $228,000 goal, 228,000 room night goal, but with a significant year-over-year growth and the maturity of our new national sales managers, we feel positive that these trends will continue in the current fiscal year. Several significant things to break out of that really do show positive movement, and that is 62% of the business was new business. Traditionally, we've been more like 40% new business and 60% repeat business. And it's important to this destination as we grow our numbers to make sure that we're getting accounts here for the first time who can then become the repeat business of the future. So the 62% trend is a very positive move. We also have decided to take a vacant assistant sales manager position and upgrade it to national sales manager and put that position back into the Midwest market. We have posted the position. It will be based here. But when we assessed our personnel needs, we decided that the assistant sales manager role was primarily supporting our DC team for their site inspections and coordination of efforts on this end. And there are other people on staff who can take over that role. But in partnership with our hotels and a lot of discussions we've had with them, we've come to believe that we do need to put someone back in the Midwest. And we were just talking in the orientation for Costa and Dennis about the fact that everyone tends to think of Chicago for the Midwest, but in reality, some of the greatest potential for us is other states in the Midwest. Places like Indianapolis and Kansas City and Columbus, Ohio, that have some major organizations and frankly less competition. Fewer salespeople call in those markets, but they still have some big business that is of great potential for us. We're not going to forget about Chicago, but as we were just discussing, Chicago has a lot of medical conventions, and we do well with certain types of medical groups. Nurses, for example, have come here. Researchers have come here, even PhD and MD researchers. They're more focused on the content of the program, whereas MDs with various specialty practices or general practitioners very often look at a convention as a vacation for their family as well as education for themselves. And Reno, at the present time, doesn't have the reputation that appeals as much to the physicians. But that being said, There is other good business in Chicago, and there's especially good business in the Midwest, and we think it's time for us to make another stab at that. We let our national sales manager based in Chicago go about a year ago because she wasn't producing, but I think with the right person, the market overall with a different emphasis can be very productive for us and represent some significant upside potential. The other trend that is very strong and is advantageous to a destination that perhaps did not book as much advanced business 5 years ago as we should have was that the booking window has shortened. And if you look at our production, 40% of the business that we booked in this past year was for next year, 2015. 27% was actually for the current year, and 18% was for 2016. So that booking window is significantly shorter than it used to be, and that allows destinations that don't have as much on the books as they would like to still have a shot of improving those numbers dramatically in the short term. And the fact that it's reflected in our actual definite bookings is positive for us. Average leads are up to about 2,000 room nights. Not too long ago, they were 1,500 room nights. So we are getting RFPs for larger groups. We are booking larger groups, and that helps because, as we all know, it's a lot easier to make a goal of 228,000, 5,000 room nights at a time than it is 1,500 room nights at a time. It takes the same amount of time, roughly, to book a convention that's 3 times or 4 times as big. So there's much greater efficiency involved. And with all the new business that's coming into the destination, we're finding that some of our biggest wins are from new markets in things like multiple level management, where you can get a 5,000 or 7,000 room night booking by pursuing a very targeted market segment like that. So we are pleased that we're making progress in that regard, and the size of the RFPs is significantly larger than it was a year or 2 ago. The West is our largest producing market, and as we've discussed before, out West, the airlift service issue is much less of a problem. If you have nonstop flights or drive time capability for your attendees, then Reno is a very convenient location for you. And for groups that are west of the Mississippi, we have a much better potential of getting them here without controversy. For groups that are national, there are more of them, and then they often are bigger, but they often have a lot of their membership on the East Coast. And because we don't have the direct service, not only is it a bit of a disadvantage, but most of the meeting planners and decision makers are on the East Coast. So when they come out to visit us, they have to connect. And although we all agree that a connecting flight is not the end of the world, if you're used to flying nonstop to all of our competitors, and you come out from Washington, D.C. to see our destination, and you have to change planes in Denver or Dallas or in Salt Lake City, it plants in their mind the fact that my people may have a more difficult time getting here than most of the destinations we go to. That being said, Washington, D.C. Is our next largest group market currently at 13% of our business. A lot of upside potential there. In between is sports, and sports used to be a bigger percentage. It's now down to 27%. Still very important, still very profitable business for us, but a couple of years ago we were counting too much on sports for our production, and now I think they represent a very advantageous percentage of our overall production, but not at the expense of us really focusing on more convention business, which is where we were underperforming for so many years here. There's an additional category that's not regional in basis, but it's called SMERF, which is social, military, educational, religious, fraternal. For a second-tier market like Reno, we are popular with SMERF business. And military reunions or military organizations, fraternal organizations, groups that are perhaps a fraternity that's on a national basis. A destination like ours is very often a good fit for them, both in terms of who their members are and the value we represent. So SMERF as a category, unique category, is equal right now to about what Washington, D.C. is, and I see in the coming year or two the D.C. number going up dramatically and the SMERF number probably much less so going forward. I just returned late last night from Las Vegas, where John Lynon, Jennifer Cunningham, and I attended the Destination Marketing Association International Convention. It was actually their 100th year. Hard to believe that in 1914 an organization was formed for marketing destinations, but it's been 100 years now. And one of the things that was very interesting in a presentation I saw late yesterday was PKF Consulting and Smith Travel Research talking about future rate and occupancy growth for the industry nationwide. and rates are up, and revenue per available room is up, and occupancy is slowly climbing. And the one thing they noted was that their projections on rate growth had not been met. Now, they came close, but they still fell short. And the question was, why is that? And the reason was another part of their presentation, which was the group market has been sluggish until very recently nationwide. So it's not just a challenge here, it's a nationwide challenge. Corporate business travelers up dramatically in volume. Leisure travel up dramatically in volume. Meetings business flat. And it's very competitive out there, as we know. But one of the reasons is that companies still believe the overall economic environment means they should be cautious in terms of launching new programs, holding meetings that they traditionally have held in the corporate market. They can postpone a meeting. They maybe can't postpone their salespeople going out to call on their top accounts. So their business travelers are on the road again, but that corporate sales meeting they used to hold every year has either been cut back or maybe postponed until conditions overall improve a little bit. And what that means is that hotels don't have as much advanced bookings on the books from conventions and meetings, and that means they're not able to push their rates as much for the transient side of their business. So a very interesting conversation, but if you really think about it, it makes sense. Fewer meetings mean less occupancy already taken care of, less ability to leverage your rates and get a higher rate from the consumers who are booking closer into the travel date. The good news is they see that logjam starting to break. There is a significant change now in the number of groups planning meetings again, and they are forecasting for the rest of this year in 2015 an increase in corporate and association meeting activity nationwide. Another thing, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but there's a big discussion in several sessions at DMAI regarding Atlantic City, and I talked about it here, and I'm sure you've heard about it as well. And there was a time when it was Vegas, Atlantic City, and Reno, the big three, and in the gaming world, and although they still have a decent volume of business, it's gone off a cliff quite a bit. And what they're facing is something that thankfully we've not faced, with having major casino resorts shutting down, many of them in close proximity to the newer, more successful properties. So they are facing a future where Baltimore is building a new casino hotel. New York has approved multiple casino hotels. Philadelphia has become one of the top gaming destinations in the country, and a lot of that is coming out of Atlantic City. They shared some numbers with us, and it was interesting. They put them up on the screen rather quickly so people couldn't take notes, but one of the numbers they showed that was very telling is a national survey, 20% of people, or I should say the other way around, 80% of people believe that Atlantic City is dirty, and 30% believe it's not safe. Well, that's a pretty difficult number to swallow. Then you have your hotels closing, and then you have all this competition sprouting up, much like the Indian casinos in Northern California have sprouted up. And their response is basically, we're going to do more in terms of retail and restaurants. Well, they're putting a brave face on it, but there's an awful lot of retail and restaurants already on the Eastern Seaboard. And the idea that people are going to travel out of their way to go to Atlantic City now to shop and eat, and with less emphasis on gaming, I don't think is realistic. So the only point of bringing this up is it's very much an industry topic. And the important thing to know is we are very fortunate here at having so many wonderful assets that are also desirable from a tourism and meeting standpoint. Atlantic City's got the ocean, but you can only swim in it 3 months of the year, and few people do. And they don't have mountains, they don't have special events, they don't have a lot of the things that we have here to promote to consumers around the country. So a cautionary tale there. They're seeing a lot of the same effects of Indian gaming, but coming from a different angle. But they have less to put forward as an alternative for business and to try and replace what they are now losing at a very, very rapid rate. As we've mentioned before, John Line and I hold quarterly meetings with our directors of sales from around town, and those have proved to be a very great platform for talking to our partners about what is going on here and how we should be spending our funds or future trade shows that they are partnering with us on. I recently held a CEO GM meeting. I had done a similar session through the Nevada Resort Association last fall that was well received, and this one was driven by a couple of current issues that I wanted to address. I had good attendance, a very good conversation, and as a result of that, I will be holding those twice a year now going forward. really with our biggest and most influential properties to make sure we're all in the same boat. And at the CEO level, sometimes things that we discuss don't make it, with the director of sales, don't make it to the owner or the general manager of the property. And we often find out that the man or woman running the place doesn't know about some of the latest developments in the same way that their sales and marketing team might, who work with us on almost a daily basis. Once again, positive feedback, and we'll be doing those twice a year now. I recently went to Manhattan and called on 4 national public relations firms that we had pre-selected and had initially called to get some data from. As many of you know, there was an article in the New York Times recently, and that was not our responsibility. It was actually a proactive article by the Times as a result of the discussion about the Tesla factory and whether it was coming to Northern Nevada or not. And through that, they heard about some interesting things going on here, especially in the business market. So they sent a reporter out. She wrote the article. It ran in the New York Times. Well, old media is not dead, folks, because I can't tell you how many people have contacted us or mentioned to us, wow, that was a terrific article in the New York Times. And I know Sharon Zadra spoke to the writer, and a number of our other electeds and our friends at EDAWN were the primary contacts for that article. But it's a great show of the response and the impact that certain key media still have today. We talk about new media and social media, and that's important for the future, but something that runs about us in a positive vein in the Wall Street Journal, in USA Today, and the New York Times has an incredible national impact on decision makers and influencers. And as such, we've done a good job on a regional PR basis, but we don't have a partner that can help us on a national PR basis. I believe there's enough going on here now. There's a tipping point of things and activities and recognition for this region. And so I wanted to meet with some of the top PR firms that specialize in destinations, talk to them about their style, talk to them about their approach, and see how we might get out there and have desk side interviews with people like not only the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, but Condé Nast Traveler, Travel and Leisure Magazine, some of the top travel bloggers. Jennifer Cunningham was at a special session at DMAI that she attended, and she sat down with one-on-ones with 35 of the top travel bloggers in the country. And it's pretty incredible to think that somebody there who works out of their spare bedroom has 1 million followers who listen to them every day about what they think and what they see as trends and places you need to check out in the travel front. So we want to address both the traditional media and we want to address the new media, and we believe we need a partner with a lot of experience to do that. The 4 companies I met with, some of you may have heard of them: Nancy J. Friedman PR, Development Counselors International, Spring O'Brien, and Lou Hammond and Associates. And in fact, Lou Hammond and Associates were represented at the trade show for the convention we just returned from, and we had a good subsequent conversation with them there, including their CEO who was there, who I had not met when I was back in New York. We discussed this at the Marketing Sales Committee this past week and received positive feedback from the members of that committee. The expenditure is relatively small to do a project, but I am going to be recommending that we do that this fall and hopefully garner some great publicity that will not only help us in the transient markets, but also help us in the convention markets to show people that this is a destination that's on the move, where good things are happening, money is being invested, and travelers have a great value yet to be discovered. U.S. Travel Association puts out their regular monthly update. In the last version, they showed some real movement in the Traveler Sentiment Index. This has been stuck in the mid-90s for several years now. People just aren't comfortable spending a lot of their money on travel until recently. So something that was a rating in the mid-90s now is up to 107 in February, which is the most recent report on the Traveler Sentiment Index. This bodes well for consumer travel, both for getaway weekends but also longer travel, and is the first real movement in that area that we've seen for quite some time. So people are now feeling that taking a vacation is not as much of a risk as it might have been 2 years ago, and that's been corroborated by other things I've shared with you in recent months. I also thought it was very interesting to see a report on the revenues that airlines, because air service is such a big topic for us, are making through supplemental charges. And it just stupefies. And $31.5 billion in revenue last year collected by airlines by charging you for drinks on board in some cases, charging you to board earlier, but most importantly, charging credit card companies to buy their frequent travel miles. It was interesting to note that the airline who had the highest percentage of their total revenues from fees is one that the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority is in current talks with, and that's Spirit Airlines. And Spirit is one that a lot of people have never heard of because they're very regional. If they're in your market, you're well aware of them because they offer a very low-cost model. If they're not in your market, you may never have heard of them, but they're wildly profitable. And their model is charge you a low airfare and then charge you a la carte for everything else. The good thing about that is that people tend to think of their travel cost on Spirit as what their airfare is, and they don't always add into the fact they had to pay for every suitcase. They had to pay even for a glass of water on board. They had to pay to put something in the overhead. I mean, it really is that extensive where everything has a charge associated with it. They tend to think about that, and because our market is presumed to be a higher airfare than many of our competitive markets, if we could get a Spirit into this market, not only would they add some new direct service for us, but they'd also add a low-cost model that I think would be well perceived by people we're trying to do business with who currently think we're $100 more per ticket, and how can we make that up? Now, we've got a good pitch for that about our lower food and beverage costs, lower hotel costs, but if we can get the air costs down with a carrier like Spirit, I think that'd be a terrific addition to this market, and they are currently the leader in the a la carte model, although ironically, from a dollar basis, United Airlines made the most, and you wouldn't necessarily think of United Airlines as nickel and diming you, but they found a lot of additional revenue that way. Operationally, we have our Exhibit Hall 5 at the Convention Center back for the first time in 2 years. It has had a temporary bowling lane installation for the USBC that has now all been disassembled, crated, and shipped off at great expense to USBC, but allowed us to host the men's and women, the Open and the Women's Championship simultaneously for the last 2 years. It's just in time, however, because Barrett-Jackson is in the process of moving in for their televised collector car auction next week, and they need that fifth hall now for growth. Last year we could only give them 4 halls. This year they'll be in all 5. They already have more cars consigned than last year. The hotels are all full next week because of golf and Hot August Nights and Barrett-Jackson being in over the same time frame. One of the biggest changes you'll see for Barrett-Jackson is that the ride and drive and hot laps component for Ford Motor Company will be moving over to Peckham Lane, which will be partially closed, and one of our parking lots on the side of the convention center. Ford wanted to get closer to the auction building itself, and the city and Hot August Nights came up with this solution that we assisted in. We are having our loss of revenue for parking offset by Barrett-Jackson, so we won't lose money on the deal, but they will actually be building a course on Peckham Lane in our parking lot, B2, I believe, Joe, is this? B2, over the next couple of days to accommodate Ford. General Motors, Ford and GM are their 2 biggest sponsors. General Motors will retain their ride and drive and hot laps at the Grand Sierra Resort in their humongous parking lot there. They decided not to move over. They like it up there. But Ford was looking for a solution, and it was a very real possibility they wouldn't come back this year if they didn't have more space for their operation to operate. We'll have about 24 hours of live TV broadcast on Fox Networks, once again showing off our beautiful destination, and we know how impactful that was last year. We'll be out on Monday all day with Fox Sports shooting a Gearheads tour of Reno Tahoe again that'll be run several times during the broadcast, showing people if you love cars, this is a great place to come to any time of year. The newly painted Reno Livestock and Events Center looked terrific during the rodeo this year, and the new seats are yet to be installed, but will be installed next month. So the full upgrades for the Livestock Events Center this year will be completed at the end of August. Joe Kelly and I met with Jim Barbie, the director of Nevada Department of Agriculture recently. He had reached out to us, and they're interested in bringing an event. And at first we were thinking they might want to reestablish the state fair, but in fact what they really want to do is establish a food fair using the Livestock Events Center as the center for that. We had a very good meeting with them. It'll be promoting the Buy Nevada program, local crops, urban agriculture movement related issues. They hope to grow it over time. It'll have a large family component, and we are happy to partner with the state on this. So you'll be hearing more about that. It'll take place sometime this October if all the details can be pulled together. So a nice new partnership with the state in getting that kind of program back in place at a RSCVA facility. Those are the highlights, Mr. Chairman. I'm certainly open to any questions.
Any questions, comments for Mr. Baum? Mr. Farahi?
Mr. Chair, I was hoping that you would get, this is end of the fiscal year, that you would have a report about what was our goals and objectives last year, and how did we do against those goals and our objectives that we set for ourselves for fiscal 13-14. So we can go through every line item, see what we accomplished, how did we do, because yeah, you just said the numbers. We had a goal of 228,000 room nights, and we achieved 164,000, which is approximately 70%. So, Mr. Chair, again, I think it's critical that these meetings, we get to numbers. And I want to urge that immediately we go over the results of last fiscal year. I know what we have done, so what we learned from it, so we can apply to this fiscal year. And that's what I would like to request, that we immediately if we do not have it this board meeting, that we will have it for next board meeting, line item by line item. How did we do and what we learned, and how we're going to apply those to this year's objectives.
Mr. Baum, you think you can prepare that for the next meeting?
We will certainly put something together, yes. Obviously, the group production is our first and foremost number one goal, and we are, at the next meeting, we'll have the year-end numbers completed, so yes, we will put that together for next meeting.
Great. I'm not only looking for room production.
Understood.
That all the items that we had as our goals and objectives, I would like to see how we did against them and what we learned from.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments for Mr. Baum? Okay, do I have a motion to accept his report as presented? Got a motion second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That moves forward unanimously. Okay, items C through I are all written submittals. We can vote on accepting those, or if anybody wants any specific comments about any of the items. Got a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, item J, the Marketing Committee, review and discussion of sales incentive plan.
Morning, everybody. At our Sales and Marketing Committee, the last one, we discussed the creation of a incentive plan for our assistant sales manager position, which we currently do not have an incentive plan for. And the assistant sales manager has multiple levels of responsibility. Some of it's direct selling for select size of organizations or select size of account potential. But they're also there to help support their sales managers through either site inspections, service, operational type responsibilities. And when we fill the assistant sales manager position, the goal there with that is to create bench strength. In case we have transitions or turnover, hopefully we're developing that person to step up in a 2-year cycle, and we want to make sure we are keeping them, retain them after our investment, as opposed to perhaps taking their experience and skills elsewhere. So I proposed that we would have a bonus plan. The core payout is $2,500 for this position. Our existing plan for our national sales manager core payout is $10,000. So it's scaled to the expectations, it's scaled to the level of experience. The quarterly bonus potential would be $500 versus $1,500 for a national sales position. In terms of its payout to percentage of a sale or salary, it's right in line with what a national sales manager payout is. You know, their salary to incentive is about 7 to 10% on a national sales level. On the assistant sales manager is about 6% of their salary. There are incentives just the same as the national salespeople for over-goal achievement. Then there's also a supplemental incentive based on their ability to support their sales manager to achieve their goals. And I put that at a value of $1,000. So the overall cap would not exceed 30% of their salary. And that's a plan in nature. Follows very much the same model as our national sales positions, but scaled back considerably given the scope of the job.
Okay, thank you. So there was research done on understanding that this is pretty standard in the industry.
Correct. Across a lot of your chain brands, your national sales brands, and then even within our hotels, sales incentives plans are in place for the majority of positions. Whether it's specific to assistant sales manager, I don't know that our hotels have that level of position, but it is consistent with the practice of, and you have a goal, you incent them to try to achieve it.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Mr. Farahi?
Chair, the only thing I would like to say, things like this, I think, is the prerogative of the CEO and the operations. For a board to get into how much to give an incentive to assistant sales manager, to me, we are getting into things that we can put our time in better use. So that's all I suggest, that CEO should be able to make those decisions and we concentrate on our goals and objectives.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Hawkins?
Just a question, John. Hopefully there will be incentives and bonuses and all that too, okay, if this is approved. It says incentive payments are to be within 30 days of each quarter completed booking on it. Does that mean the rooms were actually paid for after the rooms were paid for, booked and paid for? Or is that before the rooms are booked and paid for? Is that before or after the customer is here and gone?
It's paid before. There is some risk and exposure if we were to have cancellations, but when we take cancellations, the sales manager takes the hit on that on a net basis, so it'll impact their future production should a cancellation happen. But the percentage of groups that cancel are small. I mean, sometimes they can be significant, but the percentage of how often we have cancellations is lower than normal.
I would agree. This is the lowest cancellation percentage I've ever seen in my career. When it goes definite, it's definite with rare exceptions.
Any other questions, comments? I get a motion. Got a motion and second. All in favor? Any opposed? No. Thank you, Mr. Kerrigan. Suggest items K, L, and M that we just move on those unless anybody has any questions on them. Got a motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item N, discussion and consideration of responses to an RFQ. Mr. Baum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An RFQ was sent out and responses received on a timely basis from 3 firms bidding for the oversight role for a strategic plan process. Proposals were received by Wells Gaming Research, LT Incorporated, and a company called Strategic Advisory Group. Wells Gaming Research is well known to most of you, and they're based here in Reno. LT is based in nearby Truckee, and the closest office for Strategic Advisory Group, which is a national firm, is over in the Monterey area of California. Staff carefully reviewed all the proposals and then brought them to the Marketing and Sales Committee meeting at last week. We discussed the pros and cons of each of the organizations and felt that certainly 2 of them were perhaps a better fit for our needs than the others, and ultimately the committee unanimously approved Wells Gaming Research as their recommendation for the oversight role in our strategic planning process. However, during that conversation, there was significant comment that the company Strategic Advisory Group appeared to have great credentials and capabilities in terms of actually hands-on development of strategic plans and doing research, and that they may in fact be an excellent candidate for the assignments that are then made out of the strategic planning process under the guidance of Wells Gaming. So that recommendation is coming to this board, this full board. We subsequently have, I was out of town, but I asked Brian Rivers to sit down with legal counsel and Mr. Wells and talk about the parameters of a contract, which was done, and we have in fact a contract before us that is ready to be executed with the board's approval. So we are ready to move, subject to questions and discussions.
Any questions, comments? Ms. Carano?
Thank you. I would like to hear, since the committee was 3 or 4 people, what was your decision-making process, and Wells versus the other 2? Looking at, reading the proposals, I thought the LT was a great company that would fit our, but I wasn't in the meetings. So anyway, so I'd like to hear about your process.
Although I was the chair, I was not at that meeting, so I don't have any comment. Sorry. I know.
And I was not able to attend either. It was last Friday, and yeah, we had 2 or 3 days' notice.
Mr. Farahi.
Yeah, I was trying to, for once, be quiet, let somebody else talk. But I'm happy to answer your question. The role of what we are selecting right now is only a project manager. And to have a project manager, in our mind, was important that, first of all, they have a proven track record. And Richard Wells has done strategic planning for years and years for major companies. I mean, we are a very small piece of work compared to what he has done all these years. And his office is only 1.6 miles from here. He can come here. And he knows our community. He doesn't have to come here, take time to learn about our community, about how it works, how important the gaming piece is. Because as all of us who run hotel casinos know, that we are not San Francisco, we are not Los Angeles or Salt Lake. Gaming is a very important component of that equation when we do strategic studies. And to have somebody as qualified as Richard Wells in our community is really as a blessing. So all he's going to be doing is coordinating, managing, working with the staff, with the committee, bringing reports to this board. And once you look at what our objectives are, we thought he's the most qualified. As Chris said, and as you brought up, that other company is very qualified to do the chunk of the work. But there may be other companies. So in my mind, we should definitely look at them as one of those companies that are going to do major part of this work. And for Richard Wells to, again, manage and coordinate and report to the work with the staff, with the committee, with this board. That's what.
Mr. McGovern?
John, I just had one question. I caught the tail end of last month's marketing meeting and was able to listen to some of it. And I looked through a good part of the material here, most of it. It's really heavy on gambling. I mean, even the name implies that, versus the others tend to be, look to me like a more general view of tourism. Your comments on that?
You are absolutely right, but if you look at his track record, knowing the process of putting a strategic plan together is frankly different than doing a market research. He is very qualified to put a strategic plan together, and he has done it from the hospitality side, from the gaming side, but now his emphasis is more in gaming today. But if you look at his resume, when he worked for Harris and then for Holiday Inn and for some other major companies. He has done strategic planning. So what our thoughts were that he is going to come in having had and having done experience of putting strategic plans together, and now knowing gaming and the component of that. Because if you look at today our market, what is impacting us the most is Indian gaming in California, Oregon, and Washington. You really have to understand that to know how much of a threat they are from us and how much business they're going to take from us as far as having room nights filled, so we can decide how we're going to fill those rooms now that we're not going to have that segment of the market. Where are we going to get the rooms to fill those? And how does that impact our average daily rate? Because we always compare our average daily rate in this community with all the other communities which do not have gaming, and we always are way below those markets, where there is a clear reason what that is. That's gaming. So with Richard, he knows all those aspects, and he's a numbers guy. What I love about Richard personally, I haven't worked with him. He has never done any work for us. Now, hopefully, as we grow our company, I'd love for him to do a market study for us on that. But he's a person that knows numbers, and he's going to, I think he's a good manager. And we thought when the committee looked at all these options that he would be a person who can manage this process from A to Z, and at the end of the day, we would bring in all the other elements that we talked about to complete and have a solid strategic plan put in place.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of the other stakeholders, the ski resorts. You think all this will impact as a ripple effect on everyone with a company like this?
I think also he's going to be looking at all those things, because I've talked with him. Of course, he has met with Chris a couple of times, and he gave a report. He has a business mind, what I want to tell you. He looks at the totality of the picture, and the beauty is that he knows this market.
Thank you.
Ms. Carano.
Thank you, Ms. Fry and Costa, sorry, Dr. Archer. I haven't said that for a long time.
Costa's fine.
Thank you. I know that gaming is now an amenity, and I understand that. And I know Richard Wells, and he has done business with us and has done feasibility studies for us. And I think he's very qualified to do that. Is he going to take the RSCVA staff strategic plan to the next level? That's where this organization needs to go. We need to get into maybe the 90s. No, okay, the 20s, 2020. But this is, of course, a long-term relationship that we need to have, and we already have that with Richard Wells. The LT also knows our community. They work for the city of Reno. I don't know her, by the way. I just am concerned that is it just two people that attended that meeting to decide which organization was to be chosen?
No, there were 5.
I believe there were 3 members of the committee that were present, and then Mr. Flynn sat in as an interested party.
May I hear from other members of the committee? Thank you.
When we did meet, it was discussed numerous, we went round and round and round and round and round. And a lot of what you're bringing up was the same thing. And I think we basically kind of came to a stalemate on whether we go with one firm, whether there was some discussion around the fact that having Mr. Wells here locally would make it easier to work with the staff versus somebody from out of the area. And the original recommendation from staff was to go with the strategic advisor group. So I think the committee basically, and Dennis, if you have any other comments, Mr. Farahi made the motion to move forward with bringing this to the board with Mr. Wells. And to be quite frank, I think we were just at a stalemate, and so we wanted to get input of the full board.
You know, it was beaten up amongst the group every which way, and I think one of the things we looked at was, and we talked a lot about what SAG brought to the table versus what the Wells Group brought to the table. And they were the two that we primarily centered on. Almost all of the conversation was about those two groups. But what I thought was important to me was when we sat down and tried to get rid of the clutter and said, okay, what are we hiring this individual to do? It was to be a facilitator or a coordinator, I forget the exact term we used, of the strategic plan. That the full intentions were and always had been that that person would go out and take advantage of other areas of expertise and pull them in to help him develop different sections, whether it be tourism or gaming or whatever it would be, convention we talked about. And that having that person in market as opposed to out of market and having to coordinate that was an advantage for sure. Having somebody that's down the street as opposed to in Southern California, I think, and having a where is it? Northern California, right. But having to then pay them to come in to have their meetings, and we would have had to pay the per diem and the travel every time they wanted to come in and coordinate something. The other item that we chatted about was his familiarity as opposed to SAG's with the market. And conversations about, well, that's a good thing and that's a bad thing because you come in with predetermined ideas. But we also thought that the ability, his knowledge of the market outweighed the downside of his knowledge of the market.
I think another aspect of it also was, as you alluded to, we need to take a strategic plan to another level than what we've had. And his involvement on an ongoing basis was a positive, because it's not something that we're going to put together, then put it on the shelf, and then don't do anything with it. And his capacity, and believe me, everybody's concerned about the cost of this thing, because it's scary, was that he would continue to make sure we are adhering to that strategic plan and bring reporting back to this board on how we're accomplishing ourselves against that plan, I guess, is one of the other aspects we were thinking of too. And that was discussed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I wanted, for the record, to correct. Staff did not really make a recommendation per se. We presented all three and talked about the strengths and weaknesses of each. We were impressed with SAG's long resume of doing similar type projects around the country with some of the top destinations in North America. So that was very impressive to us, but we did not specifically choose between the three. We left that to the board.
I would just comment, in looking at all of their CVs, I would just say that if he can do for this community what he's done for Indian gaming, and I say that facetiously, then I would say we welcome him.
Mr. George.
Yeah, I know you didn't make a recommendation to the board, but you obviously spent a lot of time with this. What are your thoughts? I mean, if you had to rank them, how would you rank them?
Well,
for what we're trying to accomplish.
We took a somewhat unique approach, and that is hiring someone to supervise the hiring of others to do the work in concert. So for the content of the strategic planning process, I think a strategic advisory group or a like company is the right choice. We're going to get national quality work from a proven company through that kind of process. Since this RFQ is really for this somewhat unique approach of having a supervisory role over somebody who's going to do most of the work, I think there is a way that Richard Wells can come on board in that supervisory role, but a company like Strategic Advisory Group can do the research and the development of all the elements of the strategic plan. So if this meant, if we were just choosing one company as our partner, Strategic Advisory Group was out of the picture, I think that would be a loss, because I think a company like that is in fact what we really need to do the bread and butter of this project.
And I guess my concern is I think we're duplicating services. I think if we sit down with Strategic Advisory Group and say, how would you manage this process? I think they would come up with a very great solution on how to manage the process and how to do everything. And are we duplicating those services by hiring Wells to do the oversight when this group has already proven they can do the oversight? They haven't had someone overseeing them in their other projects. And are we duplicating those services? Are we spending extra money that we don't need to spend? That would be my concern.
Do I then say that to do a good strategic planning, 5-year strategic planning, if we really get it done,
I don't disagree with
every dime that we spend on it.
I don't disagree with you, but we're going to end up paying for two services that's duplicating itself.
No,
Your
no, they are
Strategic
not.
Advisory Group has not had to go out. They've done a very good job in the past with other entities. Done a phenomenal job in the past, and those entities didn't have to hire oversight to oversee them through this process.
Well,
They provide that oversight themselves, and they work with staffs. I mean, that's all I'm saying is in my opinion, we're wasting money. We're spending money where we don't need to spend it. We're sitting here and staff saying they would like to work with Strategic Advisory Group as far as developing the plan. I just think I think you're expending resources that we don't need to spend to hire Wells.
Just put the cost of air travel, flying from there to here, the time, the hours it takes. They're coming from Monterey. There is no non-stop flights. They have to go, and the accessibility and the time it's going to take for them to get to know our market. And when we are doing strategic planning, we are looking at every line of business we are in. And every line of business, like whether we are in golf, in bowling,
I agree 100%.
So we need somebody to be here. This person is project manager for strategic planning. He's managing the project. He's right here. To me, not to spend $60,000 so we get it done right the first time, I think is being, as I say, penny wise and pound foolish, frankly.
But I think the challenge we have is we don't know what the strategic plan is going to cost us. I think before we move forward with a contract with Wells, I think our staff should sit down. If Strategic Advisory Group is the one that we want to have do the plan, I think staff needs to sit down with them first. Let's find out what this is going to cost us. Let them say whether or not they think that oversight position is important or not, because I have a feeling they'll say it's not, because I think they do that themselves. And get an idea of where we're going to be. To enter into a contract for $60,000 and not know what we're going to end up with at the end of the day, I think is foolish.
I would say, it's 7 months right now. If you see the numbers for the hospitality, and I have a good feel of what's happening in this market, we are in deep trouble. We've been talking about this issue since December of last year. This is why we do not move ahead in this committee. We keep talking about things without getting it done. To wait again, get another person to come and say, as we said, a very important component of this process is gaming. He knows that from A to Z. He can immediately bring that into play. And again, he knows this community. He knows what we have gone through. Somebody else comes, it's going to take him a long time. He can be an advisor to those other companies we're going to bring in to do the study. He will be a great advisor. He's going to make our costs less. He will have the information to give them. So all I'm saying, we can't keep waiting to get the job done and be worried about that it's $60,000 more. The cost to this community is by far more than $60,000 if we keep not doing the job right.
All I'm saying is, since we didn't get the prices from the other groups, and if that's the group we're going to go with, let's sit down and find out where we're going to be at the end of the day. I think that's the responsible thing to do, is to know where we're gonna end up, you know, with this plan. I mean, if this group comes back and says it's gonna cost us $500,000 to do this plan, we're gonna have to reevaluate this. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, and we don't need Richard Wells to go talk to this group to see what it's gonna cost. I was disappointed we didn't have pricing in the proposals.
Well,
So I think to wait a month and have staff sit down with this other group and say, what's this gonna cost? Where are we gonna go? How are we gonna do this? And have those discussions, I think is worth it.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Hawkins?
You know, I mean, I look overall the proposals and, you know, the backgrounds of Wells and SAG was very impressive. You know, obviously Wells' background seems to be heavy gaming, and SAG seems to be kind of a more creative per destination approach. And I think that's where we are here, is the tipping point of what are we doing moving forwards. And Mr. McGovern spoke about cost, and, you know, it's a little bit of extra cost to get them to travel. And Mr. Farahi said we don't want to spend money unwisely, and I agree with that. Are we going to have to hire Mr. Wells and then still have to hire SAG or a company like them to finish the job? I have to say, their background seems to be more geared towards what we're looking for, to me. Yeah, we don't know the cost, that's the big issue. But it sounds like from Mr. Baum and Mr. Farahi and Mr. McGovern that Mr. Wells isn't going to finish the project all the way through. He's going to need more assistance from a company like SAG. And I think they seem to be more creative and not just geared, their background geared more towards gaming. And, you know, one advantage that Wells and Elite had was they were here making presentations, and SAG wasn't. I sure would like to hear, I would have liked to have heard from them, but I know this didn't go out before that last meeting where they presented. But I have to say, I kind of like the approach of SAG over Wells, even though Wells is local.
You know, in a perfect world, they merge.
Right.
And just for the record, LT has not presented to us.
Oh,
There was another
I thought
local
that was
firm
the
that
other
presented
Okay.
with Wells way back when.
You
was
know,
that?
the charge of the marketing committee
M3.
M3, that's right.
was of the strategic committee, thank you, was to evaluate and pick which one of the three we thought would be the best coordinator, not which one of them would be put the best strategic plan together. So, I mean, maybe we looked at it differently than we should have, maybe. I still say that if we're picking somebody to coordinate the program, it would be Wells. However, if we were looking for a one-stop shop, I believe it would be SAG.
And that's my point. Do we need that coordinator if we went with an SAG? That's the point I'm trying to make, is, and I'm not questioning Wells' qualifications or anything else, but we're not a gaming destination any longer. I mean, and we've got to go with a company that's going to take that broad approach to whatever we're doing. I mean, gaming is part of what we have here, but we're not a gaming destination. The days of, you know, the visitors from California coming over for the weekend to gamble are over. I mean, they're coming here for other reasons. And I think we've got to make sure that we keep that in mind as we move forward. And all I'm saying is, and maybe at the end of the day, the SAG says, yeah, that coordinator position would be important, and if you hired that person, that would be great. And we would take that into consideration. But if we don't need it, and they can handle it from top to bottom, why wouldn't we at least have that conversation first?
Mr. Chair, if I may as well, regardless of whether it's SAG being the expert, it sounds like there's going to be expenses bringing people in to assist in this process, and why would we want to incur that? I think that the one-stop shop is the direction that we should be looking at And, you know, it's gonna be working with the staff to ultimately hear what that's all about, and that's what the staff's job is.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Thank you. I was on the record before, and I'll say it again. I didn't think we needed a project manager. There's enough talent around this table, and I think we ought to cut to the chase. If we want to hire somebody to prepare the strategic plan, let's do it. I don't think we need to spend $60,000 because I think there's enough talent on our staff and around this table that can be a project manager. So I agree with Dwight. I think, you know, let's take a look, and I've said it before and went away, so I'll say it again, and it can go wherever it needs to go.
Mr. Chair, when we put together the strategic plan subcommittee, I thought the direction that we got, or the agreement that we had, and therefore the direction that we got from this whole board and representing the whole board, is we haven't had what we've considered, we assessed that we didn't have a complete strategic plan. We had a marketing plan, but not a strategic plan. And that has been expressed for at least 2 fiscal years, at least. So if we haven't had the strategic plan that we've been, that we've agreed that we need, how can we conclude that any single one of us or the existing staff, with the other demands that we have placed on them and the objectives that we have put in front of them, how can we believe that we're going to get something different with the same group? I think that we're short-selling ourselves. And the subcommittee absolutely was given the direction. As Dennis, you just said, it was approved 1 or 2 meetings ago. Get us a manager, and then get us the bones, the detail, you know, the devil is in the detail. And that's what the subcommittee went off to do. I'm sorry I couldn't make that Friday meeting to be able to participate more in this conversation, but let's remember where we've been, and is the same group of people going to get us anything different?
Mr. Flynn?
In sitting through the, not being on the committee, but sitting through the meetings, I think I envisioned, as we went through the process and listened to everybody discuss the direction that we should go, and I think you're exactly correct that the strategic plan is bigger than anyone in this room. And I think if we want different results than what we've seen over the last 20 years, the direction was to go through the steps of looking for somebody to manage the project. And I think that's what was determined at the last meeting, was that there was a need for a project manager, whether it was Richard Wells, whether it was a strategic advisor group. I think everybody that we looked at had benefits. I think what I liked in walking away from the last meeting was the hybrid approach. Is there overlap? I definitely think there could be some, but I think are we splitting hairs? You know, at what point do we get moving on this project? As Mr. Farahi said, we've been talking about this for a very, very long time. And I do think that having somebody local, somebody that can work closely with staff, there's a value to that. And are we a gaming destination? We're still a gaming destination. What I like about the hybrid approach is having a project manager like a Richard Wells that knows our destination, has gaming experience, knows the challenges on one side of what we're doing, then being able to bring in somebody like a strategic advisor group and kind of fill the gaps in. So I don't think, can one of the 3 do it? Probably. But I think when you look at the hybrid approach, you've got somebody local, somebody that can and will be by our side walking through the process and ensuring that this thing's getting done, but having somebody out there that can pull in those pieces for us. We are all busy. The staff is busy. And keep this thing moving forward until we get closure.
Any other, Mr. Finley?
Just respectfully, Pat, we're more than a gaming destination, and that's what we have to be moving forward. I understand the importance of it, but when you look at this destination, and it's not just the casino industry, it's developing so much more than that if we're going to move forward. And again, it's a component, there's no question about it. I have that component, but it is so much less than it used to be, and we need so much more moving forward.
I think that maybe I didn't explain that properly. I don't think we want to lose sight that we are still a gaming destination, but I think that's where SAG comes in. I think it's a win-win. We are still a gaming destination. Richard Wells can help bring that component, his expertise on no, we are definitely, and I think the comment was made about gaming being an amenity, and we certainly look at that. There's a lot more to our destination than just gaming. There is the outdoors, there's the ski, there's the golf, there's the event side, there's the entertainment, there's a lot more to it. I just think that having a win-win when we are still a gaming destination, at the end of the day, we still have gaming as an important component of the amenities that we offer as a destination. I think having a win-win, though, being able to do the gaming and the tourism side is important. I think it's a well-rounded expertise.
Mr.
Sure.
Farahi?
The issue about we are gaming or not, numbers speaks for Fred. By far, we are more gaming than hospitality, by far. Again, numbers. You look at the gaming revenues here against, I know you guys are not in gaming, obviously you have listed out your casino, but you look at the numbers, the number of people that are employed up here in northern Nevada compared to hospitality, I'm willing to bet you, because of the revenue we bring in, I don't know the exact number of people, but I know the revenues. So yes, this is definitely a gaming destination, but there is of course many other components that helps it to become a better gaming destination. And as you said, you're absolutely right. We have a lot more to offer in this destination besides gaming.
And to just touch on something that Dwight mentioned, because I think it's a concern of everybody's, is that unknown dollar amount that's hanging out there for bringing in SAG. And we kind of touched on it and weren't able to address it, or we're not even able to ask SAG to address it because we don't know what the scope of what wells we'll use them for. So we'd be asking them to quote on an unknown until Wells is in a position, if we pick Wells, to say, all right, this is how I want to work it, this is what your piece of the pie would be. We could then go out again, but it was an unknown. It is a question mark.
But that's why I think it would be important for staff to sit down with them. If SAG is the one that we think is the most qualified to do the entire plan, which I think there's some consensus to that, then I think it's important that staff sits down with them and has that conversation of what would it be top to bottom to do this plan. And what would it be if we hired a manager to oversee this? Then what would it be? Let's find out what those two numbers are.
Yeah.
And then make an educated decision on how we move forward.
Well, I do have to agree with you. When we did meet, we got RFQs, not RFPs, and there wasn't any
I agree.
budgeting in there, and that is a big missing component.
Right. I agree. I mean, I think you guys did exactly what you were charged to do. I'm just saying, now that we look at it, I think this is a better approach. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Chair, the issue is, Dwight, that SAG may not be the company. There may be somebody much better qualified than SAG. So the issue is, if you bring in a project manager on board, this project manager would go out there and with the help of the staff, people on this board, go out there and find out the top 3 candidates and then negotiate with them to get the fee structure. Whenever, as you know, in business, you select only one company and go get a bid from them, so obviously, if they are the only show, their fee may be different than when they know they are competing against others. And as I said, yes, SAG has impressive credentials, but we don't, at least I don't know whether they are the best qualified to do this. I don't know. So that's why we need a project manager to sit down and go through this whole process and bring the best candidates for different lines of business, who is in bowling, who is for the golf course, to the convention business. That's their job. And we can, if not, we're going to keep going through now. We say SHG. How are we going to get a number from SHG? Why SHG, I would ask? Why not somebody else? How do we know who else is out there? Somebody has to go do all that research, and that would be the job of the project manager, to bring that information and get the best team put together, so at the end of the day, we have the best results.
Ms. Weber?
Thank you. It seems to me that we're really divided. I think that there is a division, obviously, and I think that we maybe need one more month, and this is just my opinion, just to get the information as far as, is there a way that our staff could find out about SAG? I mean, it seems to me that we don't have all the numbers, and I absolutely support Richard Wells and doing it that way. But when you look around the room, there's just conflict. We don't feel like we all have the same information to make a good decision. And I think this is a big deal, and it's a big deal for the RSCVA for the future. And I just feel like maybe another month, and I don't know what we plan to accomplish in that month, but maybe we could talk about that right now. Pardon?
So I can make it clear in a motion.
Exactly.
Ms. Corona, did
One
you?
more question. In our budget for this fiscal year, was there a number that we budgeted for the strategic plan process?
$50,000.
60?
50,000.
50, so this is already over the budget, and so no more money in the budget in order to hire out.
We didn't know the scope of the project,
Right.
and the budget was obviously a tough one to put together. We put the 50 aside, realizing we'd have to shift dollars from elsewhere going forward based upon the scope.
Okay, so there will be money to hire out additional. Okay.
First phase.
Well,
Yeah, there's money, and it's just going to have to come out of other line items,
right,
primarily.
out of salaries, no, I'm good with hiring a project manager, if that's actually what Wells Group will be. I think that he would be good at that. I have worked with him, and I think that he would be a good project manager. I think that the budget is important, and I do think that he needs outside input, because I don't know that he's a creative person. And I think this is a creative project in order to see where we're going to be. I keep on looking at Reno Sparks Convention and Visitors Authority sign over there. That's what this is about. It's not about how we're going to, well, it's eventually about how we're going to fill our hotel rooms with the right people that will bring our rates up and create a destination. It has to do with air service. It has to do with what the facilities look like. I think it really needs to be, one of the things SAG had in there was, how did Denver's facility let them know that you're in Denver, not in Wichita? We have one piece of art in our facility, and it's a sheep that we probably got granted to us, leftover sheep. I love the sheep. It was a great project. I love the sheep project. Let's do that again. But it's very generic. Our boxes are generic, and we know that we have so much more than a generic destination. So I'm going to go on the record that I like Richard Wells, and I don't know what your motion's going to be, but I do think we need to move forward, but I think we need to be very concerned with what he's going to bring to the table and how much outside influence he's going to have.
Mr. Farahi.
I make, since the committee unanimously voted on this, and of course the board has to make the final decision, I make the decision, make a motion so we can turn that up and down and then move on to the next thing if that's not going to be the case. So,
What's the
The
motion?
motion is to bring in Richard Wells as project manager on board to coordinate and work with the staff and the committee and the board to get this job done.
So we got a motion, and did we have a second over here? Okay, I think we need to take it to a vote, obviously. Let's do it by a show of hands, please. You want to call out?
Aye. Yes.
Ms. Corona? Yes. Mr. Kerrigan?
No.
Mr. Dorr?
No.
Mr. Bride?
Yes.
Mr. Finley?
No.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Humke?
Yes.
Mr. McGovern?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
No.
Ms. Weber?
No.
Ms. Agar?
Yes.
The motion passes then.
What was it, tally,
8-5.
Okay, now we move on to item number O. The engagement of selected project manager and development of strategic plan. Mr. Larry, Ms. Baum.
Well, with that new direction from the board, we have a contract that has been prepared. There are certain blanks that still need to be filled in, but not many of them, so it's almost ready to go. And legal counsel presented that final contract to staff, and we are ready to sit down with Mr. Wells based upon this direction.
Just as a quick question, I think I know the answer. There's two handouts, 2 sheets of paper. One was submitted by Richard and one was one you developed? We developed?
No, one is after staff met with, and someone from our office met with Mr. Wells. In the event he was approved in the previous item, we put together a proposed agreement, and then what we did is pull out the key terms for the board, so it was easy for you guys because you got it on such short time frame. Those are the key terms. The budget he put forward is $60,000 max at a time plus costs. We outlined some of the scope of services I think that can be further refined with staff discussion with him. Pretty basic independent contractor agreement.
We're just gonna take it to
What the item's asking approval for is to allow Chris to negotiate and authorize him to negotiate and execute the agreement so the project can get rolling if that's the direction the board wants to go.
Are there any questions, comments about the contract? And okay, can I get a motion to accept? Got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to any items for future board meetings. Yeah, I think that Mr. Farahi brought up earlier in the president's report to come back with the rundown on the goals and the objectives by line and so forth for last fiscal year. Any board member comments? No public? Mr. Hawkins?
You know, I just want to say I have faith in the committee that made the selection, and the fact that it was a unanimous decision by him. But I think it's incumbent on all of us to thoroughly look at all the options. And so I have faith in their decision and that it's the right one going forward.
Thank you. Any other? Okay. Or no public comment, right? Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Motion second, all in favor? We're adjourned, thank you.
Yes.
Nice meeting you. I know we didn't get a chance to get through all this.
Yeah, sure, I'll go to